And we are live with our 71st installment of Nansen Office Hours. GM, and thank you for joining us today. Drop your GMs in the chat, please. My name is Alex. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Nansen. Some people call me the token god. If you're new to our office hours, every Wednesday we do a Nansen and Chill session where we look at Nansen's new features, we answer questions from you, and we drop the occasional alpha leak. So make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any future alpha on our YouTube channel. Today we have a very special guest. I would say almost like an old friend because we've been messaging many years, but we've actually never been on a call together. So it's great to see you almost in person. Welcome to the show, Kain.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that we never met at a conference or something like that. I feel like I'm surprised that that we never crossed paths somewhere at some point. But yeah, I guess Coven.
Yeah, that's right. Are you going to permissionless or? If so, maybe I'll meet you there.
Yeah, I'll be at permissionless. Yeah. So
okay, that's great.
Maybe we can catch up in person.
Yeah. So I guess most people know who you are, but maybe for the few who don't, you can give it a quick introduction on who you are and how you ended up here.
Yeah, of course. So founder of Synthetix, one of the earlier DeFi protocols in pre-DeFi summer, I guess. It's actually funny. I don't know if I think we had a thread a while ago, Jordan and I, that we put together of all of the people, all the OGs who used to hang out in the Synthetix Discord during the bear market. And obviously, you're one, right? And we had this channel called on-chain activity, right? And I remember there were probably 3 or 4 people that would dive in, someone would post some weird transaction and be like, what is going, and this is before Etherscan was even, good at decoding transactions, right? And people would be like, what's happening in this transaction? Would be some complex thing where, there's a bunch of stuff going on. And I remember you were in that channel. And so I always kind of wonder, how much of that process, kind of contributed to the Nansen and you guys launching.
Oh, I think actually a lot of it. I mean, one thing is just that you guys were looking at this stuff really early. And then I think another thing is that a lot of the Synthetix community were our first users. And so it was, I think in many ways, the two projects, I mean, Nansen benefited hugely from Synthetix as a project in different ways. And you guys were pioneers in many ways. In fact, you guys pretty much invented yield farming. I mean,
I think we contributed, some of the weird stuff, right? I think it was the Uniswap yield farming pool that kind of kicked things off, right? It was the first time that people had taken another protocol and composability and been we'll pay our own tokens for you to go and do something in this other protocol and started that off. So yeah.
And it's also a bunch of, obviously a bunch of forks of Synthetix that popped up during DeFi summer, which I think was also, the first kind of use case for Nansen was actually DeFi, right? Understanding who's in, the different pools, which pool should you be farming out of all the YAM pools or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah. Which it was a way of and the reason why I love Nansen so much and I love that on-chain activity channel was I'm very much about empirical evidence, right? I think that empirical data is so valuable, compared people love to hypothesize and theorize and come up with models and and do all this analysis of what could happen. But I think when you actually see what is happening, right? And I think DGen Spartan's someone who's kind of very much about this as well, right? Look at where the money's actually going, not where
exactly
that it's going to go, right? And I think that's the thing that Nansen, for me, when I first used it, I was like, this is so cool. You can, you don't have to troll through 100 transactions to find out. It's fun. It's kind of working it out for you what are people actually doing? You know, what's SBF doing right now? You know, like let's go and look at the let's go and look at, you know, the FTX wallet and see like where are they farming, right? Like so, yeah.
I'm curious on how you think about NFTs, because that's been kind of the second wave for Nansen in terms of usage. And are you interested in NFTs, or like what's your take
I'm
there?
interested, but I'm not a very sophisticated NFT trader. I would say I'm pretty unsophisticated, and so I've never actually used Nansen for NFTs, other than like stumbling across, you know, like whatever some of the tags are, like NFT whale and you know, things like that. I remember another thing early on that we talked about with Nansen that I found quite funny was like the tags, right? Like I think we had this discussion in the Synthetix Discord around like, you know, the tags are like a little bit too generic, and then now I think you've got you know, so many different categories of tags of what you can be kind of classified as. I haven't looked at my Kain.eth tag lately to see what Nansen thinks about me. I'm kind of curious. Maybe we can look at that later.
Yeah, maybe we can check that out. I think you guys helped make medium Dex Trader a meme. That was like at some point it was all medium Dex Trader. Now we have a few more labels. In fact, since then, now we have like more than 120 million addresses labeled, and we have pretty rich variety of different labels. Cool, man. So maybe I can just share my screen and we can start like diving into things here. Let's see, share my screen, and here we go. All right, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah.
Cool. So,
so are we looking at Optimism here, or are we looking at mainnet?
Oh, so this is actually
this is mainnet, right? Okay.
It's set to mainnet. That's right. And we have a few different widgets here, just to kind of bring you up to speed. This hot contracts widget shows sort of a multi-chain view of hot contracts. So these are smart contracts that quote unquote smart money addresses have put funds into. And so Jones DAO on Arbitrum, for example, or Tara on Phantom. We don't have Optimism support yet for this stuff, but hopefully we can get it shipped soon. We do have some Optimism stuff that we can look at afterwards.
But not on that stuff. Got it. Yeah.
Not on the most granular data sets or the most granular widgets and tables. And then you have like NFTs here, like Azuki, which I've starred because it's one of my favorite collections. Is at the top in terms of volume in the last 24 hours. So if you want, we can play around with the NFTs a bit afterwards. But since you mentioned Optimism, I can show people here. You can go to this multi-chain section. And if you click Optimism, you get kind of like a bird's eye view of what's happening on Optimism in terms of the ecosystem. And actually, one thing I picked up right before hopping on is that Synthetix is actually one of the top projects on Optimism. And so maybe I can pause here. I'm sure you've been asked this many times, but like, what was your decision-making process, or like, how did you end up choosing Optimism as the L2 that you guys wanted to go with?
Yeah, I think, you know, it comes down to like in crypto, ironically, so much of it is about trust, right? Like, do you trust that the people that you're working with, you know, even people within the community are kind of acting in good faith, right? And you know, are like genuinely going to deliver on what they say they're going to be able to deliver on, right? You know, there's a lot of people out there who make bold claims and then, you know, can't back it up, right? And so I think, you know, in the same way that when we started working with Chainlink, we got a really strong vibe that, like, you know, even though we were the first people to use Chainlink oracles, right, and consume Chainlink oracles on mainnet, we were just really confident that they were going to deliver, and we had a similar feeling with the Optimism team when we spoke to them, that like this was the team that was going to you know, be able to deliver L2 scaling. You know, obviously there's a number of teams that are working on stuff. You know, we've talked to the Stockware team a bunch of times. There's different trade-offs, obviously with different approaches. And you know, our view was that maintaining composability, obviously, you know, Nansen is very good at tracking, you know, composability and you know, transactions across protocols. if you look at Synthetix and you look at how connected Synthetix is to so many other protocols, like it was just critical for us to have that, and we felt that Optimism was going to be one of the sort of best ways of maintaining that composability. So there were a whole bunch of things that we considered, but ultimately we got to a point where we were pretty comfortable that Optimism was the right call.
Makes sense. And I also I can see something else here in this overview. There's also LYRA here, which is in the Synthetix or LYRA. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's
LYRA.
in the
yeah.
LYRA.
Yeah,
that's in the
ecosystem.
Yeah. So can you just explain to people like what that is? And I think there are a few other projects that we might want to talk about, like Quenta and so on, right? That are built on Synthetix.
I think what's interesting is that Synthetix obviously was originally an L1 protocol, and we had a couple of projects that sort of spawned out of the Synthetix ecosystem, ecosystem projects or what have you. But we kind of got stuck on L1, and like Thales launched on L1, but then decided to move to L2. LYRA just launched natively on L2. Alan launched on, like, we kind of got in this situation where, like, it took us a while to extract ourselves, and we're still obviously on L1, but it took us a while to kind of get that migration happening. Whereas newer projects, Quenta, LYRA, Thales, etc., they've been able to just like jump straight into Optimism and get all the benefits. So I think we'll probably end up in a situation where most of staking happens on Optimism, but we have cross-chain exchanges, cross-chain bridging, and other things with Synthetix. But governance and staking and most of that stuff happens on Optimism. But yeah, I'd say the Optimism ecosystem is very much dominated by the Synthetix ecosystem, right? It's mostly Synthetix ecosystem projects that are there. It's like per protocol and hop, and then a bunch of Synthetix related projects.
Makes sense. So hop is related to Synthetix as well. I wasn't aware of that.
No, sorry. Hop is not part of the Synthetix ecosystem, although they're one of my portfolio companies. I did invest in, about 2 years ago. I think the cross-chain bridging stuff is pretty critical, and we've worked pretty closely with them to leverage, fast withdrawals and all that sort of stuff. It's really important, obviously, for L2s that you've got, very liquid bridges.
Nice. And they also announced an airdrop, I think, recently, right?
Maybe they did. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
I don't think it's been. It probably hasn't been executed yet, or did it?
I don't think it has. No, I think the token hasn't quite launched yet. Same thing with Optimism. They announced it, and the token actually hasn't launched yet. So it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. On Nansen, what happens with the OP token, because there's a few Optimism native tokens. So LYRA is an Optimism native token. Alan is an Optimism native token, but obviously OP is going to be huge and it's going to be Optimism native. So it's going to be very interesting to watch what happens there.
Yeah, I was. Oh man, that's annoying. Yeah. Keeps jumping here. Why is that happening? LYRA. There you go. I have to just click enter. It was easier than I thought. So if I, this is actually on Ethereum, but what we would, because it's Optimism native, I guess what we would want to see here is a similar token god mode view for LYRA or on Optimism, right? So this is kind of showing there's the gateway where I guess people can bridge into Optimism. There's also, I think, a staking. I think this.
What's that top? I'm kind of curious what that top address is that has the.
I don't know.
L1, right?
It's not
someone's
L1.
accumulating LYRA. Let's dig in there.
It might.
What are they up to?
It looks like a contract, so it might. It's actually Gnosis safe, so it might be the. It might be the multi-sig or something that the team.
It could be there. It could be their multi-sig, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it looks like they got 1 billion tokens from LYRA test, presumably related to the LYRA project itself. Yeah, I would guess it's a multi-sig. It should be tagged a little bit better. But yeah, here are some of the behavioral tags that you can see which come out in real time. So The fact
I
that it's a
thought it might
token
have been the
millionaire.
Synthetix Treasury Council for a second. That's
Oh, okay.
LYRA, but that was my intuition. But no, it looks like this is why you need analytics, right?
Yeah. So it's a Gnosis safe. So probably it's the multi-sig. And looks like it used to hold like 1 billion tokens. So maybe that's the initial distribution of the tokens. And then it got sent different places, right? But there's also another, if I go back again, there's also this one, which I believe is the staking address. And so this one, I think we can do, you can right click and look at wallet profiler for token. You can also look at top depositors. But if you look at wallet profiler for token, you can see who's been interacting with this. And then also you can look at who is staking the most. So this is very similar to back in the day when we were looking at SNX and so on. Like people, I think the inspiration for some of these dashboards like literally came from the Synthetix.
Like people just saying like, oh, I want to know this, what's the answer to this question, right? So
exactly, like who are the top providers of liquidity and all that stuff. So that's kind of, I remember when we made these dashboards first, I think we were definitely using them for like YAM and all these like Synthetix ports. But I think we did it for Synthetix as well. So I mean, this is one way people can get a breakdown on LYRA specifically, but it's on mainnet. It would be nice to have this on Optimism too, and hopefully we can ship that relatively soon. And so, okay, so we talked about there's LYRA, which people can check out in token god mode, at least on L1. And then does Quenta have its own token as well?
It doesn't yet, but there's a token on mainnet that could be interesting to have a look at that I haven't really dug too deeply into, which is Illuvium. Maybe we can have a look at ILV. Not technically in the Synthetix ecosystem, although I'll claim it a little bit given that it's my brother's. But
that's hilarious. We have this
ILL, yeah.
There we go. Yeah, so really glitchy, the drop down there. Maybe something for the product team to look into. Illuvium. Okay, so this is a gaming Web3 gaming token, right?
Yeah, Web3 gaming token. Yeah, so they've got their beta out now. It's just starting to kick off. I think they're opening up the beta. They're just doing some load testing and stuff right now to see how it handles it. I forgot to sign up for the beta, and they haven't. They've been punishing me. They won't let me in. But hopefully, I'll get in the next couple of days.
That's hilarious. So this is.
I'm in the queue.
So this is like, is it a play to earn game or?
It will be. So for now, the token, the token has staking. It's got some governance rights. They've got like a staked version, which is SILV. So yeah, there's a few different things that they're doing. But the game obviously will launch later in the year, and then play to earn and all that stuff will kick off, and there'll be some staking dynamics. They also have NFTs that you can collect in the game. So it's a pretty complex ecosystem that they've built. Combination of DeFi dynamics as well as NFTs.
That's really cool. I think people don't appreciate how complicated or complex it is to build games. I mean, it's kind of sometimes I wonder. It's easy to kind of put together like a pitch deck or whatever to raise funds for a game, but like actually building the game is kind of similar to going out and saying you're to build like a Hollywood movie, right? It takes a lot of work. And I'm curious, just from having speaking with your brother about this stuff, how are they finding the process of actually building the game? Is it like kind of they knew it was going to be hard and that's how it is?
Yeah,
or is it like harder than they expected? Or
I think it's a little bit like DeFi, right? Like it ebbs and flows, right? You get a bit of momentum and then some setbacks, and so there's definitely ups and downs in the process. I think maybe 2 or 3 months ago, as they were getting closer to the beta, they were definitely stressed out, right? Because they were feeling like clock's ticking, getting closer to deadlines, and there's so many things to do, and you really feel like every day is like kind of getting away from you. And then they launched the beta, and the beta is awesome. you know, and super, you know, super fun, and people are loving playing it and really into it. And so I think that that's like taking a little bit of pressure off, because, you know, the community is like, okay, wow, like, you know, the first stage is delivered and this thing actually works. It's a little bit like getting on mainnet, right? When you're pre-mainnet, then you launch on mainnet, maybe you don't have all the functionality, but, you know, at least you're on mainnet, like you've shown you can deliver a contract and actually deploy it to mainnet. So I think that's the first step. And, you know, so far, people seem to like it. Again, I haven't played it yet because they won't let me into the beta, because I didn't sign up on time. But you know, from what I've heard, and looking at the community, it seems like everyone's having fun playing that. You know, trying to play this this kind of initial version of the game.
Makes sense. Hey, actually, one thing I wanted to ask you about. So one thing I always found fascinating with Synthetix is that you struck a very interesting balance between sort of, you know, you want to get onto mainnet as fast as possible, but it seemed like you also were very cognizant of the fact that once you go on mainnet, you know, the contracts are immutable and all that stuff, which is pretty hard as a builder, like as an entrepreneur, when you're creating a product. A lot of the stuff you do on blockchains is like irreversible, right? And so I always found that you guys were quite thoughtful about balancing sort of the flexibility that you need to experiment and create new products, new features, you know, but at the same time making use of, you know, the blockchain itself and like shipping things on mainnet. I'm just curious, how much is that an accurate description that you guys you were actually quite thoughtful around this, and something that you discussed internally? Because I see other projects would kind of do one or the other. Either they would just kind of deploy to mainnet and then like, oh shit, there's a lot of stuff we haven't thought about and there's no going back now. And then on the other hand, you could go like full on centralized and just never ship to mainnet. You just build your own like Web 2 startup almost, which is more like maybe what we've done with Nansen, right? Nansen is very much a Web 2 startup in that we don't have any smart contracts, for example, right? Yeah. It's a user interface. So just curious how you guys approach that. Is that like a conscious strategy from the beginning that you tried to strike the right balance?
I think it was. You know, we felt a lot of pressure in you know, kind of early 2018, coming out of the ICO boom, to actually deliver some value, right? You know, there was this sense of expectation that I think the entire industry had created. You know, a lot of promises, a lot of things that you know, people had said, this is what we're going to do, and you know, and then DAI launched, and you know, and that was kind of, you know, one of the first things that really started to you know, deliver, I guess, on the promises. One of the first projects that really started to deliver. And so I think everyone in the space at that time really felt some pressure to deliver, and we certainly felt that pressure. And so we kind of looked at it and said, okay, you know, do we want to take this very waterfall approach that was, you know, similar to something like an Augur, or even Aragon, where, you know, you go and lock yourselves in a room for 2 years and try and, you know, build this you know, perfect system, and then turn up and go, here you go, everyone, you know, here's this thing? Or do you say, like, let's actually, you know, try and do something that's more like a Web 2 startup, where, you know, it's kind of this constant iteration. The challenge with constant iteration and immutability is that they're incompatible, right? And so we made the decision to use proxy contracts, which, you know, was very much a decision. Now, the reason why we made that decision is because at the time, you know, early 2018, we said, okay, here's kind of the spec that we've written in the white paper. We're not going to be able to deliver some of these things for various reasons. You know, one reason was like computational efficiency on Ethereum at the time. You know, we were waiting for scaling, we're waiting for E2 to launch, et cetera, you know. And so we kind of went, okay, you know, we probably have like 5 upgrades to do. I think it was like 5 or 6 upgrades that we had planned, where we're like, okay, here's, you know, the first version, and then like we'll do like these 5 iterations. I think we're up to like 50 releases or something at this point, right? So you know, we definitely underestimated the number of changes that were going to need to be made. But making that decision around proxy contracts was kind of a critical step to say, okay, we're going to maintain this ability to change the contracts, right? And what that meant is that it was much more centralized than something like Uniswap when Uniswap was first deployed. And so the trade-off there was we also felt this pressure to really push towards like community governance, right? And that was something that I think kind of worked very well for us. The fact that because we had made this decision to not be immutable and to maintain upgradability, we felt a lot of pressure to continue to kind of iterate on governance, and we did, and we handed over a lot of control to the community very quickly, and then kept kind of iterating. And I think that that's something that momentum that we built around like governance processes has kind of put us in a really good position. And by the time we got to whatever it was, late 2018, the bear market, we were one of the few places where people were still hanging out because stuff was still happening, right? There was still stuff to talk about and get angry about and debate, and so I think that definitely helped us survive the bear market.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there is also really interesting because in many ways, you kind of pioneered this like off-chain governance stuff as well, which now is very common with Snapshot, right? Where people, it used to be the case that either it's totally centralized or you have to run like an Aragon-like DAO where everything you do has to go on chain, which became like infeasible as gas costs increased. But you actually did a lot of your governance in a more maybe informal way in Discord, like through like emoji reactions and things like that. I remember, and so that's kind of funny because back then I guess some purists were like, "Well, this is real governance, right?" And but fast forward to today, if you look at Snapshot, that seems to be the default way that people do governance. So
and this is a very good point, right? Because it's not to say that I think that the ideal is Snapshot, right? Like this off-chain governance. I just think that we had a pure view of governance, right? Which I also think is a bit naive and maybe wrong, right? And we can talk about that a little bit as well. And then you had this, centralization kind of idea that like, okay, just a few people in a room are going to make a decision and control everything. And we tried to find a balance between those two things. I do think that one thing we're working on is this new governance module, which will allow for rough consensus to happen and maintain this rough consensus process that Synthetix inherited from Ethereum. And personally, I thought this was the right approach to take, right? Rather than pure on-chain governance. The problem is that rough consensus in Ethereum has a very powerful stage gate, which is like minor adoption of a fork, right? And a protocol doesn't really have that, right? Because there's no consensus layer. And so we had to kind of find a way to fudge that a little bit, right? And we did, and we created a multi-sig, which was controlled by people who were stakeholders, and like there were all this thing, but I think this is not ideal, right? I think there is a way like we can get the right infrastructure to kind of pass this, but the rough consensus process of not just saying someone's going to propose something and then 10 seconds later we do a token vote and see who wins, right? That's just insane. Like that's an insane way to govern something, right? Like there should be a process where there's debate and you kind of present both sides and you go through, and this is the Ethereum process, right? And it was the process that I was familiar with from watching EIPs go through from 2016 all the way through to 2018 or whatever. And so when I started thinking about like how do we want to set up Synthetix governance, it was just obvious to me that you needed a forum, which was Discord for us, right? You needed a forum for the community to discuss and debate the merits of a change and why, and the different trade-offs. And I think, again, this is something that's like in the DNA of Synthetix now, where this is what we do and it's how we approach things.
How do you feel about the speed aspect though? Because the more sort of governance and decentralization you have, the slower things tend to get done, right? Because it's just the mechanics of it. You need to sort of write a proposal, you need to get people to vote on it. Have you found that frustrating to some extent in the life of Synthetix, or is that just something you think is actually enjoyable, or is it just something that you sort of think of as a necessary evil that That's just how it works with decentralization.
I think there is. I think people do get a little caught up in this idea of like, you know, decentralization slows things down. Something else that slows things down is doing dumb shit, right? If you make bad decisions and you go down the wrong path and you have to, you know, turn the thing around and do a U-turn and come back up the road, that's another really good way of slowing things down, right? It might not appear as slow, you know, as you're kind of careening down the wrong direction, right? You might feel like you're, you know, doing this amazing thing, but then when you hit a brick wall and you're like, oh fuck, we gotta, you know, turn this thing around, right? You know, you find that you've wasted a lot of time. And so I do think that, again, this is something where Ethereum, like, it could be more efficient. And, you know, EIP 1559 is a great example, right? I think the process of reaching consensus on 1559 was very robust, right? It was important. It was a critical change. It was probably one of the biggest changes, you know, to like the monetary policy and you know, overall like incentive structure of Ethereum since, you know, Ethereum went live, right? Did it need to take 2.5 years of like, you know, grinding away? Like probably not, right? You know, I remember in 2019 trying to like work out how the fuck we were going to get 1559 passed, right? One of the issues was lack of funding, and there were other things. It wasn't like a lack of consensus or, you know, it was contentious or whatever. But I do think that like when you slow a process down, you know, and you force people to like really engage, you know, even if it might be slower, right? The likelihood that you reach the right decision increases. There's diminishing returns. Like 2.5 years is probably too long, but like, you know, 2.5 weeks is probably too short, right? There's some, you know, middle ground where like 6 months of debate and discussion for a large change might be sufficient. And then you go and do implementation, and then you come back and you go through the cycle again and you say, okay, based on the implementation, here's the changes we need to make. Is everyone still happy? And this is the Synthetix process. It's a good, very robust governance process where, you know, everyone's engaged, stakeholders are engaged, you know, you go through a cycle, you've got like processes and procedures to kind of get to consensus. So I think it's critical. I think a lot of projects just, you know, kind of YOLO, you know, to a snapshot vote way too quickly without going through this consensus building process.
Makes perfect sense. Do you think it would be helpful to have more governance-oriented features in Nansen? Like right now,
100%, like there's no question. And something that we find in Synthetix that's very interesting is that the accountability of the people governing, you know, and particularly this is the interesting thing, right? People look at Synthetix governance and they go, okay, you know, 95% of votes are unanimous. And they go, oh, everyone's just rubber stamping things, right? They just rubber stamp whatever. But what they miss is that in the initial proposal, oftentimes is like totally not unanimous. Like it's going to be rejected unanimously, right? And then it's like, wait a second, you know, this person has this issue, this person has this issue, this person has this concern. And the consensus process, you know, the presentations and discussion and debate gets it to a point where a compromise is reached, right? So that it can actually be unanimous discussion. That said, I think, you know, occasionally there is just a contentious vote and it's not clear, you know, who is voting. And this goes for Snapshot as well, right? Even, you know, who's voting for who on the council, you know, how a council is being elected. I think the ability to like see what the governance trends are in a project and even how robust the governance is. I guarantee you, if you applied Nansen to you know, 10 different projects, you would get a very distinct picture for those 10 different projects about how the governance functions. Some of it would be very robust, there'd be a lot of participation, and then some of them would be just dumpster fires, I guarantee you. And there's no way to know right now, because how would you even see that, right? You can go look on Snapshot, there's no data, there's no analytics, whatever.
That's right.
I think it would be very interesting, very interesting to do an assessment of how robust some of these governance structures actually are.
So we do have something in the works that maybe I should have prepared to show it to you here, but we should get you on as like a beta tester for this. Basically,
For sure.
it's a way to combine like the voting with kind of the identity of the addresses, right? So like, for example, we had this concept of smart money in Nansen. So you know, how many smart monies have bought this token or this NFT and so on. But that's also quite interesting for DAO participation, right? Like, how do the smart money voters vote in specific questions, or what's their track record and history here? Where are they active, right? There's a lot of
do they vote,
stuff,
right?
Like, do they vote at all?
Go to Maker, right? Go and have a look at Maker governance, right? Like, and see the top 10 addresses don't bother to vote, and you're like, wait, what's going on here, right? Like, you know, there's one address that's voting in the top 20 or something like that, right? Because they know that, you know, whatever. So there's, I think that would be super interesting to have some analysis, especially, you know, the last 2 years, I think, has been a lot of experimentation. Some dead ends, you know, not necessarily like the best governance processes, right? But I think overall we are getting better. And I think as we get better, the stakes become higher, and it becomes more and more important, you know, to ensure that we've got like good analytics so we can actually do the analysis of like what is actually happening within the governance process.
Yeah. Cool. That's good initial validation of this feature then. So maybe we'll involve you in testing out the beta version of it. Nice. I want to show you some of the NFT features, as you mentioned that you are somewhat interested, but you're not like a pro NFT flipper, which is fair.
I'm interested. I'm just incompetent, I think. Right? Like it's. I'm not very good at this, even though I'm interested in it. So.
Okay. Do you have any like any NFTs that you're like interested in? Maybe we could take a look at them, or
yeah. So I think crypto Coven is an interesting one because I YOLO'd. I think I've got like 40 witches, and I feel like it's going well for me right now. So
this one here,
I don't know if I want to. Crypto Coven. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at that one.
What's the floor price now?
Looks like it's 0.35.
Yeah, that's ugly.
Oh damn!
Okay.
Yeah, the price. Looks a little bit rough.
Not looking amazing, is it? Yeah.
I know the feeling though. I've swept the floor of a few collections that haven't done super well. So so I'll just show you like NFT God mode. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but this allows you to plug in any NFT collection effectively, and you get some basic stats on it. You get like price range here, which shows kind of the min or the floor price, at least that was actually transacted on that day, the max, so what was the largest transaction, and then the average. And you can also see volume, but you can break it down to individual transactions too. So here's someone who bought one for like 2.5 ETH, which maybe is a rare crypto Coven. We can click on that and have a look afterwards. And then you see some people.
Me. It might be me.
just keep a poker face when you open it up.
It'll be under Kain.eth, so I won't be able to hide.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like we don't have rarity on it. You can. Oh, if it's under Kain.eth, I don't think it's you because we would have seen it.
Okay.
So Tanzanite of the Orrery.
Okay.
Looks like we don't have rarity stats on this one yet, but so that's this one, and then you have a few other ones. People buying like 0.31. 0.33, and then if you go to breakdown, you can see who has been accumulating these in the last 7 days. So these are people who've been, you know, buying, and then people who have been either selling or just sending out of their wallet.
Yep.
Like girl just want to have funds.eth.
I love it.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. And then if you scroll down a little bit, you can see the top holders, and there you are, man, Kain.
Yeah.
So you're on the front page. Also, Stani is there. So it looks like
Stani and I are just idiots. I mean, that's the conclusion that I come to there. Right? I got to have a chat to him about this. He's the one who got me into this whole thing. So.
Oh, that's hilarious. You have like the same amount as well, like 29.
I know. I think I bought enough to just pass him by like 1 or something. I think that's what I was trying to do. Yeah. So interesting.
And so sorry, you got 33. He's 29. What the hell? He's got a smart. I'm sorry to tell you, you don't have a smart money emoji, but he does.
I'm not smart money. That's why.
I mean, I'm also not smart money. So you know.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah.
So
Who else is up there?
You have Zeneca here. Zeneca 33.
Oh, okay.
He writes a lot about NFTs.
Yeah.
And then you can click.
Is Stanny sold? No, Stanny's never sold.
Okay. Alexis Ohanian is here as well.
Yeah.
What the hell? This is like it looks like a few big names are here.
There's a lot of big. Yeah, there's a lot of big names. There's a lot of big names in there.
That's funny. We also have this new tag. So this is kind of like a medium dex trader evolution. Blue chip NFT holder. So that's someone who holds one of our blue chip NFTs. And so I can also show you that just here on the side. We have these like NFT indexes now. And so we have our own blue chip 10 index. And so this shows like in aggregate how the blue chip market is doing. And so
not amazing is the answer.
It was doing really well. And then like, the last week, it's basically dropped like a lot. But and then you can scroll down and you see which constituents you have in the index, like Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, Mutants, CloneX, Doodles, Azuki, etc. So this is a new label that I wanted to plug here because it's in my notes to call this one out. Blue chip NFT holder. So that's someone who owns one of those NFTs.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this is a pretty interesting collection. I mean, from the perspective of like who is owning this, it looks interesting. And then the question is more like, maybe there's a way to see who's been selling this one. Mr. X on OpenSea. Damn it, Mr. X, you lost conviction. Yoga Labs.
Yoga Labs. Okay, yeah.
not Yoga Labs.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so this can help us navigate a bit, like what's going on. And we also have this new listings tab, which is pretty cool because this goes beyond on-chain data. This now pulls in data from OpenSea, and you can see the current listings. But we of course add our Nansen analytics here so that you can see how many times they've dropped the price, for example. So this is pretty funny. If you sort on this, you can see this NFT. Actually, here we go. Mirrorbabe.e has this NFT here, 5948, that they have dropped the price of 9 times. So
can we actually see what it is?
Yeah, we can. So let me click through on this, and it's gonna take us to this page. For some reason, we don't have the images of these ones loaded in, so we have to like click through on OpenSea. I think, and then so it's this one here, Meldola Ghost, 1.5 ETH, and you can see actually some of the trades here. There's also 0x BEX, Whale, MFer, Nickpad, and .ETH. So and then you can see the profit loss if they do sell it. They would make 0.5 ETH on the trade. But then
what I'm really interested in is ringers. I've been meaning to buy a ringer, and I've been kind of watching to see what's been happening. Ringers and there's another Art Blocks one that I've been watching as well. Oh, okay, interesting.
This guy, JG, I think he's one of our power users, actually. He is smart money, and he bought it for 45 ETH very recently, actually. So, I mean, these Art Blocks collections are not super liquid, right? Because there's very few of them. So you don't see like a ton of activity, but if we go to breakdown on this one, okay, here's a blue chip NFT holder that apparently sold one. There hasn't been a lot of buying. Oh, there's also Bury.eth. That's fine. Purple8.eth. And then, so we can look at the top balances here. If I just sort that.
Okay, interesting.
So here are the top holders. Okay. So a lot of smart money, actually. So this one has 53, 50, IMDC investor, B something something on OpenSea, 0x NFT.
And can we have a look at the floor price? Like,
let's go over to listings. So the floor price, here we go. So floor price was actually hovering around 30, and then it jumped. Now it's like 60.
Interesting. Someone must have swapped the floor, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and here we have this is pretty cool too, like a distribution of price on the current listings. So if someone scoops, these 3, actually, if someone scoops these 3, it would jump to like 66 ETH floor.
Yeah, interesting.
If someone buys these 3, it go to 72, roughly. And so you can see here smart money listings and delistings. So these are like new listings, and then here are people delisting them. So this guy delisted one at 35 because he maybe got worried that someone would buy it. Oh yeah, we also decompose like who's listing at floor. And so these are the people here that, yeah. So
Fidenzas is another one. Maybe we
okay, let's have a look at Fidenzas. Oh man, we have to do something about that thing here. Fidenzas there should be at the top there. Matt Kalish. So he's selling one at a loss actually.
Yeah, see, this is one that I've been looking at, and there's a few people who've listed things at pretty significant discounts to what the last price was, which I think is an interesting little data point. Yeah. So let's let that load in the background. But you can see the floor price similar. It was pretty low and it jumped up, and it's kind of come down a little bit in the last few days. You can also see that you used to have around 60, actually around 60, 70 listed, and then it dropped down. Now it's about 40 or so, 46. Can you see if that that drop was through delistings or through sales? Is there a way to kind of infer that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, look at the sales volume.
Yeah, I mean, you can first look at the. Oh, these are actually just smart money delistings. So what you'd actually want to see is the delistings. But but you could look at their sales here. So if we just kind of line those up, so it seems like it started dropping like May 6th to 10th, right? So May 6th looks like there was quite a bit of sales like here in the beginning. Oh, actually, you can see this like one, So there's been a decrease in listings, and then a few sales that spiked too. So it looks like it's a combination.
It's a combination of some sold and some delisted. Interesting.
Yeah. So this might be helpful when you navigate the Fidenzas market if you're scooping something up. Do we have? I don't know if we have. Well, I guess you don't have rarity on Fidenzas in the same way.
I think there's a couple, like Rarity Tools does it, or Trade Sniper or something has it.
Okay.
I think.
Let me see, because if I go in here, it does have trades. So why don't we? Maybe I'm gonna ask the guys why don't we have rarity for this one. Okay, so Fidenzas and Ringers. Yeah, those are nice OG collections to list.
Yeah.
So I think this is kind of the way I think of this listings tab is like this is kind of the OpenSea view, but on steroids, right? You get kind of much more analytics on it, and then you can combine it with the address information, so you know like who's actually selling it, and then you can see how many others they're selling, etc. Now, what I really would like, and I mean this is gonna come soon. This is a bit of a product alpha leak, but there should be a more, say, integrated way for you to communicate with these people. Like, hey, Matt, maybe why don't we do an OTC deal? And so that's something that you're gonna see in Nansen in not too long.
I mean, he's dropped the price 10 times now, so motivated seller.
Exactly. There's another one here. Okay, wow, 100.
Yeah, that one's pretty brutal. Savage. I feel like there's one that I was looking at where I was like, wow, like that's, I guess they're an epic NFT collector. Maybe we have a look and see what they've.
Yeah, what else? You can look at them. Like, maybe, what else did they buy? 123, 61, 51. So these are the sort of like the listings right now that are currently selling at a loss. There's 4 of them, right? So
yeah.
And that you can use that to position yourself a bit in terms of like negotiation and price and things like that. Looks like this. They also made some money on added Bob squad. Okay, fair enough. So there's a lot of stuff you could dive into there. Let me just check my notes. So we covered the NFT blue chip holder. We also have a few other new labels that might be interesting to people, like Uniswap V2 factory fork. So that's like basically when someone takes the V2 Uniswap V2 factory and just fork it, we will label it as a fork. And the same with like liquidity pool contracts. I think maybe we do the same with Synthetix too, because there's so many projects that fork Synthetix, but I'm not 100% sure.
Or staking rewards, maybe. Staking rewards.sol.
Yes, yeah, that's the one I think that most people have, right? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, anything you want to look into before we wrap up here? We're getting close to the hour, actually.
No, I think that's super cool. Yeah, the NFT stuff. Obviously, I've looked at a lot of the DeFi stuff and low level transaction things, but the NFT stuff is really cool, and the governance stuff I'm excited about. I think that'll be really awesome as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped about that too. It's gonna be fun. So let me just maybe cover one last question from the chat. So someone's asking about SUSD. And actually, maybe it's like a big can of worms to open, given the stablecoin situation right now. But like, actually, how do you? What's your thinking on like SUSD, and maybe do you have any reflections on what's going on now with USD?
Look, I think there's a range of designs for crypto collateralized stablecoins, right? UST is a crypto collateralized stablecoin, as is SUSD, right? I think the question is, when you design these systems, and a lot of people kind of, I think, like create a false equivalency between SUSD and even some of the other crypto collateralized stablecoins. DAI, DAI and SUSD and UST are all similar, right? In the sense that they're using crypto collateral to create these stable coins. It's just a question of what are the mechanisms, right? Like what are the incentives? And I think that the interesting thing with UST is it's a 2017 era stablecoin as well. People forget that. They think that it came out in like 2019 or whatever, but it actually came out at the same time as Haven launched NUSD. And like NUSD and SUSD, I think that there were challenges with scaling it. And it really wasn't until the launch of Mirror, a little bit like Mirror and the incentives that they created with Mirror induced demand, I think, for the stablecoin. And then obviously Anchor took that to the next level, right? But with all of these things, it's important that you have the right kind of guardrails, I suppose, right? And Synthetix and Maker have now gone through 2 cycles of massive uplifts in ETH price in the case of Maker, and SNX price in the case of Synthetix, and then 80+% drawdowns, right? And those mechanisms have kind of held up. I think the challenge with UST is that it was so on the edge in terms of the mechanism design. Like, you're really pushing the limits of what was going to be incentive compatible and stable. If there was to be, a kind of a downturn, right? There was very little buffer, So you're going around a corner at 200 miles an hour, and you're an inch away from the wall. That's great. It looks amazing as you're doing it, but you make a tiny little error there. Whereas I think Synthetix is like, let's go around the corner at 60 miles an hour and make sure we've got a lot of room. A Maker maybe is like, let's go around the corner at like 20 miles an hour. So I think there's like a range of how aggressive you want to be. That said, I think that we've learned a lot from the V2X process. Synthetix launched as in SUSD in the current Synthetix system launched in like late 2018. So we're coming up on 4 years on mainnet, and NUSD and Haven was a year before that. So we're coming up on like 5 years of we started this conversation about empirical data, right? We've got a lot of empirical data about how these systems function, what the incentives need to be. And so I do think that we are taking a lot of those lessons, and also a lot of the lessons from experimentation and iteration that's happened in Curve and Balancer and Uniswap and Aave and Compound and all of these different projects that have been testing out different things. And we're basically trying to create a V3, this new iteration of Synthetix that takes those lessons and incorporates them. And so I think that it will be more scalable in the sense that we're going to introduce new forms of collateral, probably not USDC, because I think that we want to avoid centralized collateral. But I think we're going to create more powerful incentives for using ETH and other decentralized collateral to expand the SUSD supply. And we're also going to ensure that the incentives for people participating in the ecosystem are stronger than they are now. I think that the kind of the incentives that we set up in the early days were, and obviously we've iterated over time, but we were kind of constrained by that initial starting point. Even if we've iterated away from it, now we get a blank slate. We can kind of start fresh and be like, okay, if we were designing this thing from scratch, what would we do? And have a second chance to kind of redesign some of the mechanisms. So I think it's going to be much more scalable, much more incentive compatible, and some of the things we've got planned, like cross-chain bridges and stuff, are going to create a lot more demand. So yeah, we're pretty excited for V3 and what it's going to look like. And hopefully later this year it'll the first version will be deployed.
That's really cool. So I guess with Terra and Maker, it feels like the main product is the stablecoin, whereas with Synthetix, SUSD is almost just kind of one of different products. Is that accurate, or how do you see the role of SUSD? Like, is this one of your core products almost from the Synthetix ecosystem, or is it just kind of a tool to be able to use Synthetix, the Synthetix ecosystem in general?
I think it's a confused, and this is one of the maybe not ideal decisions that we made, right? This idea of having a bunch of different spot synths, SBTC, SETH, SEuro, etc., and giving people the ability to have like spot exposure. I think that decision, maybe in hindsight, was not ideal. That said, we didn't have futures at the time. So I think that what V3 may look like is more kind of directionally towards futures, and like, okay, let's lean into futures. If people want spot exposure, they can get exposure unleveraged, right? So they don't need to take on leverage. They can just get unleveraged exposure to these assets if they want to do that. But SUSD will maybe be the only kind of tokenized asset, right? Or something along those lines. I think that's kind of the direction we're heading. And so what that means is that instead of, right now people look at SUSD and they say, oh, I don't know, you can probably pull it up here and see what's the supply. It's a few $100 million or whatever. In reality, the total synth supply is like 3 or 4 times higher, right? And at times we've had over $1 billion worth of synths, but people look at SUSD and say, oh, well, it's way below a lot of these other stable coins, but actually it's like a suite of stable coins. So I think by like bringing them all back together, it might help to kind of demonstrate that SUSD is actually a more robust and larger stable coin than people realize.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So maybe to wrap things up, like, what's the best way for people to get engaged in the Synthetix ecosystem? Like, what's the product that you would point them towards to use right now, or what's the way to get involved?
Yeah, so I mean, Quenta on Optimism is the way to really use the product. That's probably the primary place. Futures are there, but Thales, LYRA, Alan, there are other projects that leverage Synthetix in different ways. So options for Thales and LYRA. Alan is like a fundraising protocol. So there's a bunch of different projects within the ecosystem that take advantage of Synthetix in different ways. But in terms of getting I guess engaged with the project, the best way is still Discord, just like it was. We don't have the on-chain.
Yeah.
You guys kind of took the on-chain activity channel and and
we should like join forces again somehow.
Yeah,
we should do like weekly. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
cool, man. It was great chatting with you after all these years in almost in person. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
And
hopefully
so that's
see each other in Florida.
Yeah, that would be great. So that's a wrap for today, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Remember to subscribe to our channel, turn on the notifications so you don't miss any alpha leaks in the future. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks again, Kain, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. See ya.